Good morning, church, and just want to introduce ourselves in case there's some people on that haven't met us before. But my name is Mike. This is my wife, Ellen, and we met in the campus ministry. We've been married soon to be 25 years.
Next month.
Yes. So we have four kids. Two of them came out here with us. Hallie and Isaac that most of you have met, but we have two other ones that are, say, back in Kansas. There's Bailey, who's married. She's been married almost 3 years now. And then our son, Josiah, who's part of the campus ministry as well. So we're excited about talking about renovation. That is one, opposite of JJ, that is one of my passions. I really love to do woodworking, do projects, but it's also nice to see it done in a timely manner so it doesn't just stay out there forever. You really want to get it done. And 14 years ago or so, when we moved into our last house, we had a house built. It was really nice, but the one thing that really just was a little thorn in my side was the kitchen, because when you're having people over, when you're hosting things, for whatever reason, people love to congregate in the kitchen. They want to hang out, they want to do that. And so we have this little bottleneck. So if you open up the refrigerator door, you're trapped. It was blocked off. And so we had that, we finally, after time, it's just like, this is enough and we need to change this. So we end up renovating it and tearing down walls and redoing the kitchen. It was really nice, and it opened the space up, and we could just entertain and have a lot of people over, and that was really nice. But also during that time, we also were just working through a lot of different things. A lot of things were happening, is going on in our life. My wife will share more about that.
At that time, Mike was part of the board at church. So he had a lot of meetings. He was also asked by the kids' school to be on a parent advisory board. So he also had meetings there. We both were part of the core leadership team at our church. And then we also led a group in our area, which was in Topeka. We led a group of 25 disciples and their 30 kids.
Yes.
And
Outnumbered.
We were definitely outnumbered. There was lots of needs, as there were many baby Christians, and then when you have that many children. So it seemed like we were busy meeting needs, but I also feel like during that time we were just busy, and there wasn't a lot of time for Mike and I. There wasn't a lot of family time, and it seemed like we were just about doing rather than being.
Yes. And so, also during that time with our leadership team at church, we were working through a lot. There was some transition that was taking place, which resulted even more meetings. So there was a lot. And after working through all those different things, we had to take a step back and look, says we really need a makeover. We really need to change, because life had become about doing and not connecting with God. Just like JJ had shared in Psalm 127, that's what I wrote that down as well. So I think God really wants us to hear that. Is that God has to be the foundation of what we're doing. If it's not him, we're just busy doing that. I was busy at church. I was really involved, but really relying and connecting to God with all the different things that had happened, it had lost that focus. So we decided we need to just, like I said, renovate. So in every renovation, you have to come up with a plan. I hope after hearing this seminar, this workshop today, that none of the people out there who enjoy it decide to just knock down a wall today and say, hey, I want to renovate, because you might have to really work through this workshop even more, take it to heart if you just decide to do that. But you have to come up with a plan. And we had looked and saw that, man, we've been in the church in our area for about 30 years. And one part that I really enjoy is just when we go to a conference and you see all the disciples all around the world. And just wanting to see more of God's kingdom, seeing more of God's people. So we had visited out here before, and we got to see this place, and we're like, hey, this is a place that we might want to live. So we talked to a lot of our people back at home, our leadership, and we wanted to make sure that our kids were involved and connected to what we were doing to get their input as well. We just didn't really want to make a decision totally on our own and just do it because, again, after so many years, you're invested into that area. So we sought advice and we came out here to visit. We saw the church. We really enjoyed it. One time we showed up and there was Gino who was greeting us. And we had ran into him 2 years or several years ago. We were vacationing and we stopped in Duluth and he was part of the church there. And so coming out here was just really nice to see another familiar face. The kids enjoyed it. So we thought this would be a great place to be. And the other thing that was, again, as we started this journey, that we really wanted to stay focused and connected back to God. And it's awesome that you can live here and you can't help but see God when you just step outside and you see all this beauty that surrounds us. So we, at that point, this was our plan, and we decided that we were going to move here. So the next phase of a project, you got to make sure you have enough money to complete the project. You got to pay the cost. You have to count the costs. So after 30 years, like I said, of living in an area, we had so many relationships and family. Our kids had relationships. My wife had her job. And so those are things that we had to understand. Are we really willing to pay that cost?
As he said, we had to consider my job. I was sad thinking about leaving my job. And then I was also overwhelmed thinking about getting a new job. However, for me, the hardest part was leaving all of the relationships. We had really spent a lot of time building family out there in our home, and not just with our church, but also with our neighborhood. We would host events in our neighborhood where we would take the projector outside and watch a movie on the side of our house. And I remember one big party, we had a Moana party for all the kids, and we had tiki torches. But speaking of kids, we always had kids at our house. We either had neighborhood kids or I have a lot of nieces and nephews, or we'd have disciple kids. And Isaac, he loves to play hide and seek. And so the kids would love to come over and play hide and seek. And one of my fondest memories, and I'm being sarcastic, was when one of them decided to hide in my laundry room. And they got into one of my laundry bags. And unfortunately, they were a little bit too heavy for the laundry bag. And so they ended up tearing out the bottom of it. So I had to get it replaced. But nevertheless, our house was the place to, play hide and seek, to have fun, to have lots of kids over.
Yeah. So again, when you think about all the years that we've had there and just the relationships, that was a cost that we were willing to make, because that was the dream, to really have people in our life, that what we saw here at the church, and that we could draw closer to God with with all that, we knew that, hey, that was going to be a challenge. But it was willing to just really renovate with having God as our focus. So once you come up with the plan and you estimate, man, what is it going to really cost? Then you start. You got to start the construction project. So again, one of the things that we wanted to focus on is building relationships. And we knew moving out here that the church was involved in helping other people building relationships. So we said that we're not going to sit back and wait for people just to pull us in, but we really want to get to know other people. So we were inviting people over into our home to share meals so they can get to know us, we can get to know them. We also wanted to make sure that the kids were feeling pulled in as well. So they would go around church and know who they were meeting, and we invite them over as well so that they can have opportunity to build some friendships. And we also want to make sure that they were a part of all the events and activities that were offered to the kids. So we made sure that that was a priority, that they get pulled in.
The other thing, we just really wanted to get back to having great family times, back to building family with our kids. So we just started doing a lot of different activities that we all love to do. We take some very long walks and have some kind of silly conversations. We played a lot of board games and cards, and even for Christmas we got a ping pong table. And we also one of the things that we love to do as a family, and also what brought us to Colorado, was just we love to hike. And so we would find trails, and we would hike trails, but we'd also invite other families to join us. So that was helping to build friendships, but also to build family.
Yeah. So Isaac has an open invitation that he will challenge anyone in ping pong because he's gotten really good. But the other part with that is that, again, we wanted to grow closer to God. We wanted to connect back to God again. And as my wife mentioned, we go out on walks, to go out for prayer walks. And I think God really just shows you how awesome he is. Because when I look back on those challenges that we went through at church and the decisions why we decided we wanted to make a change, it really wasn't the challenges that were the issue. It was, who was I relying on? To grow closer to God, you have to really humble yourself and see, man, where am I falling? Because God is always there. But are we really tapping into God? Are we really relying on him? And through all those, difficulties, all the busyness and everything, what I really saw, that I was just starting to just rely on myself, and just relying on my years of being a disciple, my experience or whatnot. But was I truly relying on God? And 1 Peter 5:6-7 says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. And that's where we grow closer to God. When we not try to shoulder all those burdens by ourselves, but we cast them onto God. We depend on him. And that's where it has taken a while just to kind of decompress all that stuff that was going on and say, Mike, you really haven't been relying on God like you need to. And that's where it's been good to just grow again, to not feel like I need to be this, I need to be that. God just wants to love me, comfort me, and take care of me. So that's was the building phase of the project. But also too, and anyone who's tackled a renovation project, like JJ said, that there's things that it runs longer than what you expect. There's always some unforeseen situation that takes place.
Well, the first challenge, and I think we all had this challenge, was the coronavirus. And, it was important for us to help our children build great friendships, but it seemed like, with the coronavirus, you had to get creative about it. It was harder for being at home, who do you see or spend time with? And we even had one of our kids mention to us how lonely they had gotten. They enjoyed doing school online, but they really missed being with people and friends. And so me and Mike took that to heart. And so, the first of the summer, we sent our kids to Kansas back home to spend some time with family and friends. That way that they could get reconnected. And also, over time, they just, this is the first time they've ever been away from, everyone they grew up with. Hallie was born in that house, that previous house that we had built, and that was their whole life, and we had left it. And so we sent them back, and I also thought it was a great time for me and Mike to connect and have that alone time, and because it just doesn't seem like we get enough of that. However, a couple of days it was going good, and we were enjoying our time together. But then after a little bit, I started noticing that Mike was kind of a little bit withdrawn towards me. And I was seeing it just didn't feel right. And so we started talking about it. And he started talking about how he was feeling that I wasn't trusting him in some situations. And then he also was pointing out to me that he felt at certain times I wasn't present. And, he shared about, we have been working hard on our kids to get along. And he had shared about a moment when they were really getting along and they were cracking some jokes, and we were all in the room, but I was there, but I missed it all because I was deep in my thoughts. And this thought occurred to me that, even though we moved to Colorado and change the scenery, change the environment, I still brought me. And so I still, I have to deal with my own sinful nature. And here's another part of my sinful nature was when, Mike mentioned all of this to me, instead of having godly sorrow and asking for forgiveness and asking for help and really plugging in to those relationships that I've been building, I got withdrawn. I looked inward in myself and kind of had a pity party, and it went on for a couple of days, and it just showed, just how independent I had gotten and how I had, fallen back into my old habits of doing things on my own, figuring things out, even what Mike had shared about not relying on God, going in our own strength. And I was miserable those couple of days. I was feeling sorry for myself, but thankfully I had some good friends in my life that could tell something was not right. And they came to my rescue, but they just showed me that, boy, I really need to change that. I really need to tap into those relationships that God has given me, and just to be open and vulnerable, no matter how ugly it gets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's things that we have about our nature and we have to really go after, because even myself, I, again, try to just pull up by my own bootstraps and we're going to fix this ourselves without realizing, man, God has set you up in a wonderful place where there's a lot of people that are willing and wanting to help, to not fall back in those paths. Because I wasn't setting my wife up for success after having a challenging talk to let other people know that she might be struggling through some things. So, like I said, every project has its setbacks, but God is there, because at the end of the project, you actually have to take a look and you see what you've created. And sometimes when you're going down a long road, you stop and you have to look back and see, man, look at where we've come.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back and I see all the different things that we've gone through, all I see is God.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see that, man, God carries us. He brings us through those challenging times. Like I said, the kids have had great connection with their friends back at home. We've still had relationships back with people that have come out and visit us a lot. The church here has been just so welcoming, and we just feel just really hugged by God to be a part of this church. And then, like I said, every day you can just go outside. If you're missing something, just go outside and just look west, and you can see his beauty, all that he's created. So that's our home renovation project of where we've been over the last year and just how God has just taken us through this time. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sticking with us for the second half here. Thanks to Mike and Ellen, too. Guys, what you shared was so powerful, and it really opened my eyes to some things I need to work on, especially planning things out. Sometimes I just dive in and I don't even think about it, and I don't take time to plan, and that's so important. So thank you guys again for sharing awesome stuff. Carrie and I are renovators in our work. Carrie owns her own painting company, so she's painting houses and things all day and having crews. So she's a renovator, and I'm a teacher. So I'm renovating in a way by helping kids learn and grow. But what I found out that for me, renovating my marriage has been really, really hard, really difficult. The thing that we're going to talk about today that we renovated in our marriage recently is a difficult thing for us to talk about. So bear with us. We all bring baggage into our marriages, but I've learned that my baggage is our baggage, and it's so much easier that way. I discovered that all the hurtful and painful and happy things, all of it, it's not just mine anymore, but it's ours. And again, it makes life so much easier. So when we thought about how we renovated our marriage this summer and how we tore down this wall that was standing between us and God, we talked about all the reasons why we didn't tear this wall down sooner. For me, it was just a lack of courage, more like a lack of complete trust in God. I didn't fully believe or want to believe or understand that God would be with us through this whole process. In Isaiah 43, verse 2, the Bible says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze." So our wall that we renovated, that we tore down this summer, there was a wall between Carrie and I, between us and God, for 19 years in our marriage. We knew it was there. We'd fight about this wall a lot early in our marriage. We just struggled with how to finally tear this wall down. It seemed like such an impossible thing to do. So we patched up that wall. We painted that wall, but it was still there. After a while, it just became part of our house, if you will. It was just there. It was something that we ignored and we just rarely ever talked about. Maybe for me it was a pride issue, not talking about it, because it was something that I felt a lot of shame over. But God's bigger than my pride. God's way bigger than any shame or disappointment that I feel. And this summer I finally realized that. So the wall in our marriage was this. 27 years ago, 27 years, on August 5, 1993, my first wife, Ann, and I were setting out on a vacation, road trip. We're going to drive from our home in Clinton, Missouri, and I was a police officer in Clinton at that time, and we were taking a long overdue vacation. So we're going to take this road trip and drive out here to Denver to see my family. We were both really young. We were 28, just starting our family. She was 6 months pregnant. Our 2-year-old son, Michael, was sitting in the back seat, strapped in, ready to go for this trip. And as with so many things in marriages, I remember arguing about getting lunch before we left, because I was hungry and it was all about me. So she grudgingly let me go through the drive-thru at McDonald's so that we could hit the road. But we were both mad because we were getting such a late start. We were both just upset. I remember it was raining, hot, humid, just like Missouri can be in August. I remember driving down that 2-lane country road out of town, cursing the traffic. That road was wet, it was hard to drive on. And then we came to a hill just outside of town, so close to home still. And out of the blue was a trash truck, flat out stopped in the middle of the road ahead of us, just trying to turn left. We were coming up on that truck fast, way too fast. So I just remember hitting the brakes and looking up in the rearview mirror and seeing a pickup and a camper coming up fast behind us, ready to hit us, barreling down on us. And then I don't remember much after that. Next, somehow I was out of that car. I was laying in the tall grass on the side of the road. The rain was coming down. I couldn't move, but I could hear my son, Michael, in the car crying. And then I saw a person I never thought I would see in that situation, a friend of mine from my police work, who was a state trooper. And he was standing over me. He looked me over and he told me I'd be okay. He told me to lay still, not to move. Not that I could, but he told me that the ambulance was coming. I could hear the sirens, the ambulance. I could hear my son crying, but I couldn't move. I couldn't get up and get to him. So I asked him about my wife, and he just shook his head, but he wouldn't say it. He wouldn't tell me. So I remember them taking me in the ambulance. Hurt so bad, my ribs were all broken. My lung collapsed. I had a head injury. And I just keep remembering that I could still hear my son crying, but I couldn't get to him. Sorry, take a little break. Nobody would tell me about my wife till later on in the hospital. And my friend, the state trooper, Dave Geisel, again, and a priest came into the room and told me. They told me that they told me first that my son was okay. He just had a broken leg. And then they told me that my wife was dead, killed out there on that little 2-lane country road. I was, for so many years, so angry with God that he would let this happen. Why would he let something like that happen? She was 28 when she died and left me alone with my 2-year-old son. Why would God do that? But now I know. I know that God had plans for me. God had plans for us to have this marriage, that I get to have this marriage with Carrie that glorifies God. But then, and for so long, I was just angry. But I learned to live again. I learned to bury my emotions, just to bury the whole thing. I learned quickly that people don't want to talk about bad things like that. They didn't want to know. So I believed that nobody would ever understand, not even my wife. So I stopped talking about it, and I built a wall around that time in my life. I told Carrie I told her, several times in our marriage what had happened, but sharing was just way too painful. And I didn't like that raw emotion. I didn't want to face what had happened because I was ashamed that I was the one who was driving during that accident. And I was driving. I keep telling myself over and over all the time that I could have and should have done something different, that I could have somehow prevented that accident. So we talked about it a bit early in our marriage, but eventually it became a wall between us. I let my pride and my fear and my shame kick in, and I wouldn't talk to her about it at all. It really made Carrie mad, honestly, and it made me mad too, that we couldn't talk about this thing and we couldn't get past it, and that it was between us and God. But this summer, that changed, and God is good, and God really helped us this summer, and Carrie's going to share on that part.
Yeah, I always referred to August 5th as the accident. And Anne's death was the accident. And like Kevin said, he told me about it, but he told me very factual about it. He told me about, it was facts. It wasn't his emotion. It wasn't his pain. And I would get angry because I wanted to hear that part of it. And I felt like he just kept continuing to shut me out. And early on in our marriage, especially when August 5th would roll around, Kevin would become distant and grumpy. And I didn't always understand it because I was like, why are you feeling this way? Look at that. We have life went on and we have this marriage. And I was so consumed with how he was treating me, my insecurities, with how he was treating me. And at one point, I said to him, I think it was even the first anniversary that we spent together of the accident. And I said, why are you so grumpy and stuff? And he's like, it's the anniversary of the accident. And in my selfishness, I replied, oh yeah, Anne was perfect. And I'm sorry that you're stuck with me. And that hurt him very deeply. And he said, and this is why I don't talk to you about it. And from that time on, when we did talk about it, it was very superficial and it was very factual. Yes, this accident happened. And that we would just kind of leave it at that. But there was this angst, I think, in both of us to try to figure out how to share this accident that was so much a part of our lives. So this summer, and it's so funny, I think Mike and Ellen touched on about how God works through so many different things. But this summer, when Ryan and Andrea Chacon were going to be moving here, they lived in Columbia, Missouri, and they had asked us, hey, when our car gets there, if we Venmo you the money, will you guys pay for it and sign for it? Because we won't be there yet. And I just got in my head, road trip. I wasn't even thinking about the accident. I was just thinking, we've been in quarantine. This would be so good. Kevin and I have never road tripped without kids. It would be so much fun for the two of us. And so we responded with, hey, can we road trip out? And they were so gracious and they said, yes, thank you so much. So as we were getting ready to go on this road trip, I asked Kevin, I said, Kevin, do you think we could go to Clinton? But I was thinking of his healing, and I was thinking of him, not me. I didn't realize, I'll share more later about how much this was going to affect me too. And so he thought about it, and he said, yeah. So he contacted some of his policeman friends and arranged for us to have lunch with them one day. And that scared me because I was like, oh, they're not going to like me. These men knew Anne, and, I'm the intruder, and what it did was it helped me to see some of the bricks that I had put on this wall. The brick of anger in Kevin not sharing his pain. The brick of resentment, the intrusion of the accident into my life and how it was affecting me 20 some years later. The insecurity that I was less than Anne. And I didn't give Kevin a safe place to talk about his pain. And it was, that was my parts of the wall. So we made this plan to go out there, and the drive out there was great, and we loved it because we didn't have kids going, are we there yet? Do we have to stop here? I need to go to the bathroom. This is stupid. Why are we doing this? And, we got to spend some time with the Chacones, and then we left the next day and we drove down to Clinton, which is about,
40 miles.
40 miles, kind of out of the way, but well worth it. And we had lunch with his policeman buddies, and they made me feel so welcome and part of that policeman brotherhood family. And so a little bit of that insecurity started to die. And I asked Kevin, there's two ways out of Clinton. And how God always gives us choices. When we're faced with something, God always gives us choices. And we can choose the easy way out. We can choose not to face things, or we can choose to kind of to face things dead on. So I asked Kevin, I said, which way do you want to leave Clinton? And he said Highway 7, and that was the highway that the accident happened on. So he took me around Clinton and showed me the house that they lived in and the hospital where Michael was born. And, I could just feel this, my emotions subsiding. I was feeling close to Kevin. I was feeling a part of this. His life with Ann became very real to me. And I was glad that he had shared those things. And then the dispatcher that we had lunch with, one of the policemen, had said that the highway had changed. When the accident happened, it was a 2-lane highway, and now it was a 4-lane highway. So I asked Kevin, I said, are you going to know where it was? And he said yes. And so obviously I drove, and we come up to this hill, and Kevin says, it's right over here. And I see this little pull off. And so I pull off, and Trevor, would you put that slide up, please? So this is the road. This is the only piece of the old road that was still left. And it's the exact spot where the accident happened. And so I took this picture when we initially got out of the car. And if you see where Kevin's looking, that's the ditch where the car landed in. And then to the right is a fence, and it has these beautiful flowers. And I felt like that was God's way of showing healing and refreshment. But we had to deal with the ditch first, And Kevin, you can put the slide down now, Trevor. Kevin, for the first time, walked me through every detail that he could remember. And he walked over to that ditch, and we placed flowers there. And he told me everything that he had just shared, maybe a few more details, but for the first time, I could hear Michael crying. I could see Ann in that car gone, and knowing that Kevin's unborn daughter was also gone. I could see Kevin laying in that ditch of weeds and stuff, trying to get to his family. And this wave of emotion just came over me. I can't explain it. I just started weeping. And Kevin was weeping. And we were weeping together. And that wall just started to crumble. Because I felt like our hearts were one, because we were willing to face probably the hardest thing probably in our marriage to date. I had to make peace with Ann, because when Kevin and I were first married, I was not the stepmom, bonus mom, whatever you want to call it, to Michael. And I had to face that I felt like I had let Ann down. So of course I was going to build a wall. I didn't want to feel anything where she was concerned. I had to confront some of the ugliest parts of my heart. And I had to confess those to Kevin. I had to confess the anger. I had to confess the resentment. I had to confess the insecurity that I felt like I had to compete with Ann. And we weren't ready, obviously, years ago to talk about this. And it's funny how God brings everything together and gets us ready. For us to tear down the wall in our marriage, we had to go to that road. We had to go to that road. And I think we all have roads that we have to go to in our marriage. We all have roads that we need to go to together to face and to share, things that may be difficult. It may not be as intense as what Kevin and I have been through in this loss, but you can't compare either. It could be just intense for you as a couple, and the things that have caused you to have this wall. And just because you have a wall doesn't mean you have a bad marriage. I mean, I felt like Kevin and I had a great marriage, but what happened at that road, as that wall crumbled and we shared this pain together, is I got to see different facets of Kevin's heart. It's like when you tear down walls in your house and you open up your house and you can look into different rooms and stuff. And it was amazing. It was comforting. I truly felt God's presence there. I felt hugged by God. I felt loved by God. And when Kevin was sharing with me, I felt God. I almost felt like I saw God walking right next to him through all the places, I mean, I had just had lunch with some of those police officers that came up on the accident, and even to hear a little bit of their stories, about Anne, it endeared her to me. It made me want to welcome her into our life as part of our life, because she is. Kevin has a son with her. So Anne is always a part of our life. And we had avoided this, though. We had avoided this depth for 19 years, and I don't know why. I'll be honest, I don't know why. I think it was too hard to go there. It was too hard to go on that road, to stand there and to see this, to see that mangled car, to hear the traffic. I could hear the sirens coming up. And I felt that desperation that Kevin felt, that he couldn't get to his son and he didn't know about his wife. And all of a sudden, it was just like, this is not about you, Carrie. Yes, it is, but this is about Kevin, and his healing. And when he heals, I heal, that we're in this together. And I felt like in that moment of crying together, praying together, I really felt like our hearts were one. I had never in 19 years felt closer to Kevin. And it was refreshing. It was painful, but it was so refreshing. It healed our marriage in so many ways. Our trust became deeper. Insecurity melted away and was replaced with the security in our walk with God that he would be there through anything we would go through, that we were not alone. Again, I felt God on that road. I felt loved and hugged. Numbers, well, I think the other comforting thing, and Mike had alluded to about looking back, is how God went before us and prepared this time for us. Like he allowed me to have a relationship with Jeff and Lisa Chacon 30 years ago, before the accident even happened, and babysitting little Ryan. And then Ryan grows up and he comes out here and we're connected and we get to serve them and drive their car out there, and how God just beautifully orchestrated all of that. And then even the fact that the only section of that old road that was still left was the exact spot where the accident happened. And I think God planned that, I don't know, maybe the guy forgot to tear the road out, I don't know, but God set all of that up for that time for us to go and deal with our wall. And it just deepened my trust in God, and it made me feel so secure, and it made me feel so close to God, because in Numbers 23 verse 19, it says, God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? And then in Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 6, it says, and this is before, when Moses is, passing the baton to Joshua, and that they're going to go into the promised land, and God had promised to go in before them and destroy their enemies and stuff. And then he says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And In the 27 years since that accident, God has been going before us and preparing. And God has been with us. Even when Kevin and I weren't together, I feel like God was on this journey going before Kevin to get him prepared for this time in our lives. And he, like he said, he promises to never leave us or forsake us. And he didn't leave us. He was there. I mean, you know, you see those things on Facebook where the angel or Jesus is there with you at an accident site or something. That is really, truly what it felt like, is that God was there. And you know, the photographer in me, I wanted to document everything. But one thing that we did do is, this is a piece of the road that we brought back with us. But it's also a piece of our wall to remind us, you know, to trust God, to let God take us where we need to go, to build down any future walls that we have, to build up, to tear down, you know, help other people tear down walls that they may have in their marriage. Because I'm telling you that it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And even sitting here, I can still hear Michael for some reason. I can still see it. I can still hear the traffic. I can still hear it. And I can still feel his pain. But God makes it okay, because now our marriage is even better. Our marriage is even deeper. You know, so what road do you need to go to in your marriage? What do you need to confront so that your marriage can be even better? It's not that you're a bad marriage, but your marriage can be even better than what it is. And it's hard. It's a hard road, but God will always be with you on that road. Thank you.
I want to just share, to kind of close this up and wrap this up a little bit, is a practical or a challenge for all of us, it's simply this: just tear down the walls in your marriage. Tear down the walls in your marriage. And how do we do that? Pray about it. Pray together, pray alone. Pray that God will give you the strength, the courage, whatever you need to tear that wall down, to identify it and go after it and tear it down. Talk to your husband, talk to your wife. Talk about that wall, that thing that you've been avoiding. Be brutally honest if you have to. Imagine how much better your marriage could be if together you tear down that wall. Imagine how much more your marriage is going to glorify God when you tear down these walls. Come to a decision together that it's time to tear down that wall. Make your plan, like Mike and Ellen said. Don't just go for it. Make a plan together. Figure out how you're going to tear this wall down. Talk it through. And then pray again and again and again, as many times as you need to pray, that God will give you the tools necessary to tear these walls down. Ask another couple to help you if you need to. Many times we can't do these things alone. We've got to have help from somebody else. I think that to wrap it up, standing out there on that road this summer was so healing for me and Carrie. And I'm just so grateful to God that we had that chance after 27 long years to stand out there on that road and tear this wall down. Just by being vulnerable and telling Carrie everything, and standing in that place that was so terrible. And it's now almost a beautiful place. The tall grass is still there on the side of the road. Blacktop's still there. But that wall between Carrie and I is gone. That wall between us and God is gone. It's okay to talk about how we feel. It's okay to talk about the accident. It's not that ugly wall between us anymore. Again, just think about what your marriage needs to be renovated. Just because there's things in your marriage that need to be renovated doesn't mean that your marriage is bad. Sometimes we just have to update a little bit. Sometimes it's just an annoying little thing. It doesn't have to be a giant thing. It's just that we all have walls, little walls, big walls, whatever, that stand between us and God. In Psalm 46, 1-3, it says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. This renovation might be painful for you, uncomfortable, awkward, but I know that it's worth it. And it'll make our marriages stronger, and we'll all come closer to God through the struggle of renovation. That's all we have for our part. Next up, we're going to go to some questions and answers. And thank you again for listening.
Wow. Well, I'm not really even sure how to respond to that. Man, the whole time you guys were sharing, I just felt so emotional, and so felt just like, oh my gosh, like, man, I had no idea just what you guys really went through. It really is so inspiring just to, think about all of that. And like, I was trying to put myself in that situation and feel like, man, how would I go about even trying to address a challenge like that? I'm not fully even sure how to do that. But then, I think as you guys were sharing about how you were working through it, I felt so much hope and inspiration, and felt like, oh my gosh, this is like the Notebook times 10 as I was watching, because I felt just so overjoyed and proud and just like inspired by the way that you guys went after it. So thank you for sharing your lives with us. We're going to post some questions for the scales, the fitches, and the moggings, and a combination of you guys will answer the questions. So please feel free to continue to post questions if you guys have any, but Trin will ask the first one.
Yeah, I also did just want to thank Carrie just for your vulnerability and sharing. And I think the way that you shared the insecurities that you have, I know for me, it helped me to be able to connect with and even see things that maybe I have in myself. And so I think that it was really easy to relate to you, and that I think you've probably helped a lot of us be able to put into our own words or identify our own feelings. And so I thank you guys both so much for your hearts to share. So the question we have is, what if the individuals in the marriage have different visions for what the renovation or the upgrade should look like?
We definitely had different visions of what I guess we came at the wall from different perspectives, obviously. So I think to respect how each person comes to the renovation, if you will, and how to renovate it. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way on how to renovate. I think, like my way of tearing down my section of it was to be open and to confess and to face. Kevin's way was to face it and then to share the pain. It was the same, but yet very different. So I think you have to just respect how each person comes at the renovation and give each person their process of how to do it.
Just be willing to talk about it. Just be willing to talk about it with your wife or your husband as many times as it takes, and be willing to put the pride, anger, all the emotions to the side, and be selfless.
Yeah, I was just going to echo with that. Is just even after us discussing our move out here, the one thing that we really wanted to have is unity. So there can be different points of view on the issue that you're trying to resolve, but at the end of the day, we have to be unified in the decision that's made. So that requires to be humble, be willing to listen to the other party, and to really try to understand it from their perspective.
Question was asked, what do you do if couples have different ideas of what needs to be renovated, right? Kind of along the same lines. I think what to Mike's point earlier is, there needs to be a plan, right? A discussed plan. One person in the marriage might think, well, God, this is what we need to renovate. And another person that, the spouse may feel like, no, this is what we need to renovate. Just like in a home, right? You look at a home and there's like 5 things that you want to renovate. Well, which one is the most important one? And I think that has to be discussed. We've had a couple in our lives, just recently, and we just said, write down what you think is the 5 most important things to focus on, and you write down the 5 most things that you think are to work on, without talking to each other. Let's come together and let's match those together. And so, we were able to identify what were the top 2 needs for them as a couple, and said, let's focus on this one first, and with the plan, knowing that we're going to hit this one next. If there's not a plan, then the other person's going to feel like, well, why are we working on that? And why don't we work on what I said? But I think if there's a plan and you kind of write that down, you're able to kind of feel good about the direction that you're going to be headed. Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys for adding that in. My next question was, both couples mentioned having to deal with some distrust. What are some healthy ways to build trust in our marriages?
I think I just always go back to communicating, talking with your wife honestly. Sometimes it's brutal. Just being willing to put aside any fear, any pride, anything that's standing in the way, and just talk to her. And just share everything with your wife. I mean, that to me is the quickest way to build trust. Is just share everything. It takes a lot of prayer. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of humility. Like you said, JJ, you got to be humble. That to me is the quickest way.
Yeah, I would just add to that as well. I think what Kevin's saying is right. A lot of times, I think as husbands and wives, I know we've done that in the past with Kit and I. You have thoughts in your minds, but you don't express it. But you act upon your thoughts without really expressing, and you just assume that that's truth. And that really hurts a lot, because instead of really giving the other person the benefit of the doubt to confirm or deny what you're really feeling, you just live in your own mind. And you say, well, no, that's what I saw. That's what I believe to be true. And I'm not going to give you that opportunity. You don't really go through that process versus just saying, wait a second, you did that, but what did you really mean when you said that? You give that person the other opportunity to really express what's really there.
I was talking to one of the church leaders that really helped me in my own thought process. A few years ago, a couple came here to speak, and I remember he said, I think that's Sheridan, he said that there's no such thing as marriage problems. There's only people that have problems, and they bring it to the marriage. I know for me, I had that trust issues here and there, just because of my own baggage and my own shadow. But when I was talking to this sister, she said that we are not actually in many ways called to trust people. We are called to forgive. And I think for me, a lot of times I know that when I have a marriage problem or issues that we need to take care of, I really need to take care of my own way of viewing things. It might sound very spiritual or impractical, but really it boils down to my trust in God and letting go. And that's the quickest way for me, because I can still air out my feelings and be open, but when the mistrust is part of it, it's not going to go well. So I think I need to really trust God first, that God's and be unoffendable, which I've been learning, instead of feeling like the reason why I don't trust you because I was offended by you. So I think I just want to share that it really boils down to my own individual self with God that I'm bringing into the marriage and the relationship.
That's good.
I think for me, and I saw this way early in our marriage, to open the door for trust, I really need to make it a good environment for Mike. Like, sometimes I'm emotional and he's a little weary of how I might take it. Or I might even misconstrue it and turn it against him. And so I just I've had to learn this over and over and over, that I need to make it a safe place for Mike to be able to share his feelings. It's easier for me personally to talk about my feelings or share my feelings, but for him, it takes being drawn out. But if he doesn't feel like I've created a safe environment, or he thinks this will just make it worse, he won't share. So I think with, and trust issues and stuff, just what Kit was saying and stuff, the bottom line is our trust in God. And I know that I would quickly get insecure or forget that Mike had the best in mind for me. I would automatically be hurt. And this was a hard one for me early on, and still I need to work on it.
I think also too, going with that from the other person who feels like they're not being trusted, is to really listen to what the other person is saying and own what you can own. Don't deflect. Well, it's just your issue. You're blowing things up out of proportion or whatever it might be, but really listen to the person and own what you can. That way that person can feel that they're being heard versus it's that wall between us and them.
Yeah, thank you guys for those answers. This was kind of a two-part question directed to, first of all, Kevin and Carrie, but you guys can feel free to add in as well. But the first one is how do you go about finding courage to take on those big walls in your marriage that need to come down? And then the second part of that is, what are some practicals to creating that safe place that Carrie spoke about?
You're here. Sorry, I got to unmute. Finding the courage to do these things, to tear down these walls, it starts with God. You really, I just had to completely, totally surrender and trust God. And I had to pray a lot and then pray some more and just get my heart totally right, where I was just focused on God, and that God could help me through anything, even things that seemed impossible, even things that will seem impossible. I have to just know that God will always be there. Creating a safe place just goes back. You want to share about that? Yeah, go ahead.
I can answer. I think to create a safe place is to listen. One of the things that destroyed Kevin's safe place with me is I didn't listen. I wanted to have a comeback. I wanted to not necessarily, I wanted to hear, but I didn't want to hear. And I took everything very personally. I was very offendable, I was not unoffendable. I think that's a great point that Kit was talking about. You cannot be offended. That was his emotions. And yes, they affected me and stuff, but I needed to listen to him. I needed to cry with him. I needed to be vulnerable and put, with him. And I think that created that safe place that we've continued now for 2 months. Even this past August 5th, we actually talked about the accident a lot and just shared and stuff. And I think when you listen to one another and understand too, and I didn't understand this back then, that Kevin's not the enemy. Our spouse is not the enemy. We're in this together. We're here to help each other get to heaven and learn how to love God and things like that together. But Kevin back then was kind of the enemy. I just felt like he was the enemy. And so I was very resistant to listening to him. But now that I see him not as the enemy, I feel like that in and of itself created a safe place for him.
JJ?
Yeah, I was just waiting to say. Wasn't sure if you guys were going to respond. Or not. So maybe the last question here that we'll end out with is, with the busyness of life, our kids, our jobs, and all kinds of things, how do we carve out some time to focus on us?
That's a great question. And maybe I'll say this, okay? Actually, to put a plug in for this coming devotional, we're actually going to be, the men, we're actually going to be splitting up this coming Wednesday. All the married men are going to be together, this group here. And then all the campus and peak ministry singles are going to be in another time with JJ. But some of what we're going to be talking about with the brothers is really, we always talk about taking the lead in our relationship with our spouses, but we'll talk a little bit more practically speaking about what do we need to take the next step with our families and with our spouses. And part of that would be something that we're going to be introducing more and more as the weeks come on. And what we're talking about as a staff is really just this whole concept about Sabbath and Sabbath, and really making time to invest in our relationships with one another and in our relationship with God. So maybe that would be like a little teaser to make sure that you're coming on Wednesday to hear what we're going to be talking about.
That's not a time to take a Sabbath. Okay.
Yeah.
10.
Yeah, don't take it on that Wednesday. But I think at this point, we're going to close out. Is that right, JJ?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. And so I wanted to just kind of overall just say a couple things, and as we close out here, what an incredible time today.
Thank you.
And as we're going through the agenda, with Kevin and Carrie, and just kind of looking through the whole morning time plan, I go, wow, this is going to be a great time. And wasn't it a great time? Let's give a virtual clap here. I mean, that's, I think I felt it was very honest. It was very real, and it was very practical. Just even kind of thinking through what Mike and Ellen were just sharing. You kind of can walk through those steps in our own lives. To have that plan, to count the cost. To do the work, and it was really easy to follow. But I do appreciate really with both couples the whole thought that you would think that after a period of time you don't have to renovate, but really in some ways it's really after that period of time when you really have to renovate, isn't it? Not that we have to wait until everything's breaking down. No, sometimes you have to renovate something that just needs a little bit touch up for what I'm hearing today. And then sometimes we have to really break down that whole wall. Okay. So it's kind of in between. What was encouraging was, I think over the years, sometimes you feel like this wall has been here, like what Kevin and Carrie were sharing, and it just became kind of part of the fixture. And we got used to that wall being there that's really not good, but it's just going to be there for forever. That was a wall that was broken down over 20-something years that it was broken down. And I wanted to share this scripture here because it gives hope to all of us here today. And it's simply because the Bible says that God is the architect and the builder, right? But it says, humble yourselves therefore under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you.